This is Groundeffected. My name is your dad, and welcome to a houseplant that's been left out in the rain for too long. In this video, I'm going to show you how I speed painted my box of Necrons that I got with the Start Collecting set from the Warhammers. If you haven't played this game, it's something about little plastic men. Some of them are robots, some of them are not robots. Some people get angry if you call them robots. If you would like to see how I painted this Necron robot thing, I'm going to show you that in this video. Also, don't forget to click like, possibly consider subscribing, and while you're there, you might as well leave some words in that little box that YouTube gives you to leave some words in. You might as well click the notification bell. I've told you enough of that nonsense now. Let's just get straight into painting a Necron. So in order to paint these Necrons as fast as possible, I need to create some kind of way of painting the entire body of the Necron silver, but still giving it a shade. And the best way of doing that is by putting down a black base coat. Even though I put a black base coat on everything, this is the best way to do it for this because it's so quick to just do a dry brush over the top with any of your favorite silver paints, and you've got an awesome silver looking part just by adding a little bit of dry brushing, and you're getting all that shading for free. Now, of course, there is going to be many different ways of doing this on any kind of model, but if you want to do it in a fast manner, this is one way you can do it really quick and get really great results for very minimal effort. And I like minimal effort when it comes to painting 780,000 little plastic men, which I may or may not play with on a piece of cardboard and pretend that it is an army. Either way, if you want to paint a lot of these guys, you want to make sure that you are cutting corners but not cutting your quality. In order to create some of that awesome glow that these Necron dudes seem to have, they all seem to glow with a wonderful green, and I like this green. So to make that green a little bit brighter, I want to make sure I put down a good base that's going to show that color off. I'm going to use white oil paints. So in order to set up for that, I'm going to be painting this white oil wash into all the little gaps and crevices that I want to have that glowing fluorescent green that I'm going to paint in them. The reason I use an oil wash for this is because of the way that it flows into areas. You can see it flowing into these spaces with very minimal effort, and this is because of capillary action. This is a very fancy word that people would use in regards to the way that paint seems to flow on the top of a model. Now, of course, this does work better if your model is shiny, and that means if you have sprayed a clear coat or a clear lacquer over the top, that's going to give a little bit less surface tension and allow for your paints to run in their capillary ways throughout the little gaps and crevices. But like I said, you can't really do this with acrylic paint as well as you can do this with an oil paint. So if you want to use something that's going to need a white base underneath it, or you want to put white into tiny little gaps, then the best way is with an oil paint. I'm going to take the same base paint color that I used on my Space Marines, and I'm going to paste this all over the base. And the reason I'm going to use the same one is because these are my Start Collecting box. So if I want to play with them, I basically want them to look like they're standing on the same ground. Even though that makes maybe no sense to anyone else, it makes sense to me, and this is why I'm doing that. In order to create a little bit more interest on the model, I'm going to add white to certain accent areas, namely some of the pipes and things like that. This again is just setting up for later. Then I take a bronze color, and my favorite bronze is the one from Pro Acrylic, and I'm going to paint that over their shoulder pieces. And realistically, you probably want to paint all the armor pieces on these models, but for me, I was happy with just their shoulder pieces, giving them a nice, slightly vibrant color to pick your eye off the tabletop, but at the same time saving me time by not having to go through and paint the entire model's armor. This specific paint covers very well, and this is one of the reasons why I like to use Monument Hobbies metallic ranges, mainly because they are pretty good with coverage, specifically the dark silver and this bronze color. I'm then going to start working on that awesome friggin' whatever you want to call it, this alien glow goo stuff. It's a technical paint, and this comes from Citadel as well. And basically you're gonna put this in all the areas that you want the shining bits to be, and by shining I mean the glowy green stuff that is coming out of the Necron somehow. I don't know what it is, but it's nice, it's enticing, I like it. This doesn't flow nearly as well as a wash or anything like an oil wash either. So in order to make this go in its place, you need to kind of put it in its place, and that means to use a nice sharp pointed brush that's going to help you get it into the areas that you need it to get into. Another thing about this paint is that, kind of with all paints really, is if you fill up those little gaps on the chest, it will look like it's full to the brim, and when it dries you would expect it would look exactly the same. It doesn't. What will happen is it kind of shrinks a little bit, so just be aware of that when you are painting like this, so that you don't come across any surprises. And if you were expecting it to be solidly filled like that, you may have to just do a couple layers if you wanted to fill it up. Not sure why you would want to do that, but maybe that's something you want to do. Another very important thing to do is make sure that that oil wash has had a good chance to dry. It needs to be very dry, because if you do go around and touch anything near it and it's not dry, it's going to just pick up and it's going to ruin everything you do after that. I then dry brushed a bit of white over the symbols on his chest and those alien markings that go along the side of his collarbone, and I'm going to just highlight certain features across the gun and across the rest of his armor, just in certain places. I don't want to go overboard with this. I just want to make sure that I highlight certain key areas of the model to make them stand out. For example, the sharpened pieces of the weapon, I want them to look sharper, so to create that kind of effect, I'm just going to give it a highlight around the edge, and that's going to trick your eye into thinking these things are sharper. Especially at a distance, you're not really going to tell that. If you're taking photos of it, maybe it's not so great, but again, we're trying to get these models on the table really fast, and I don't want to sit and paint for 7 days. I then took a Resin flesh shade and I just added tiny little dots of this into some of the damaged pieces on this back of this freaking Necron dude. I don't know if it's damaged pieces, maybe it's he's been in a hailstorm. I'm not really sure what's happened. Maybe his master threw some spanners and things at him during his tests. I don't know. I know nothing about these guys at all, but I do know I want to paint them and put them on the side of my table and look at them. We love plastic little army robot men, don't we? I then take Caribou Crimson and I'm going to paint that all across the base. This time you want to be quite thick with it. It is going to pool up and it's going to make certain puddles in areas, but that's okay, because once this dries, it's going to give it like a good depth perspective from dark areas being a little bit darker and the light areas being a bit brighter. If anything, I would try to push more darker spotches towards the back and lighter towards the front. This will just help with depth once again. I went into the other smaller Necron, as this is not the Royal Warden one. I don't know what you call this guy, just Necron simple. And I did some highlights on him too. I went back into the weaponry again and I placed a white dot across the center of all the little orbs on those, I don't know what they are, energy beam things. And then I took that technical paint and I airbrushed it over the weapons and slightly on the chest of the Warden. You don't have to do this if you don't have an airbrush. What you could do is just dry brush this stage. I reckon you could still get a good looking effect just from the dry brush, but for me, I have an airbrush, so I'm going to use it when I can. I took a yellowish kind of browny tan color and I just dry brushed that across the front end of the base, and this was again to create that depth I spoke about earlier by having it darker at the back of the base than it is lighter at the front. I went back into the final highlights on couple of pieces across the models, and this was just to push that white that's kind of gets dulled out as you work. Also, when you put white down on a model and give it 10 minutes, you'll find out that that white is actually not white and you can still go even whiter. So this is just me going through and reinforcing some of those white highlights. I added a couple of tufts across the bases, and this was, I don't know, it looks cool. You got to add tufts. If you don't add tufts, is it even really a miniature? Then, once I'd got my tufts down, I watched a video about how you should paint your tufts to make them look better, and now I feel bad, so I'm going to go back and paint all my tufts. And then the most important thing you can do when you paint any miniature is to paint the rim of your model's base. If you don't paint the rim of your model's base, you might as well just throw your miniature in the bin right now and just forget about painting miniatures. Once you're done painting that rim, that is when you can say your model is done. Hopefully you managed to pick out something from this video that may help you in your next painting project. Or maybe you're trying to make a box of Necrons yourself. If that's so, and you would like any more advice, or you would like to be part of a community over on Discord, the best thing you can do is look in my description for the link to the Patreon. You will get nothing, however, you do get access to our Discord. I would also like to say a super special thanks to my Patreons for their support. And yes, if you notice, this is not my usual environment, but things are going to start changing soon. This is not what it's changing to, but I'm trying to get you guys used to different environments before you start to freak out. Thank you for watching. If you don't like it, click the dislike. I don't even care. Jump out the window. I just call. You can't really say anything about moms, can you? It's not acceptable.